further ado, our guest today is a funny stand-up comedian, humorously sharing her experiences growing up in a conservative family, early marriage, life after being banned from church, and a whole lot more, with over 2 million plus YouTube views. Now, she is a Nicaraguan American comedian who turned her journey as a Latina misfit into an award-winning one-woman show. She's performed at Laughing Skull and the Big Pine Comedy Festival. She's premiered her hour at the 2022 Hollywood Fringe Festival to rave reviews, winning a Producer's Encore Award. She was also a featured comedian at the 2022 Great American Comedy Festival. She's made her TV stand-up debut on PBS's First Nations Comedy Experience in 2018. She's also the creator and the host of the Villains of History podcast, a co-host on the Unofficial Official Story podcast, and a frequent guest co-host on YouTube's Real Rejects. And now to add to her repertoire, first time ever here on the Circles app. Friends, will you help me welcome the Kat Alvarado. Kat, thank you so much for joining us here on Circles.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. How did I do with all that? Just curious.
You made me feel like I need to edit that down. There's a lot.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have been soaking up your YouTube, your videos, everything. I love it. We're going to get to the little of the comedy maybe later on in our talk, but I wondered if you could do us a favor and just unpack you a little bit. Give us a peek inside of Kat. Who is she? How did she get to be this person that we're talking to tonight? Do you mind sharing?
Absolutely. Absolutely do not mind is what I mean.
Cool. Go for it.
So I was born to in a mixed culture family. My mother is from Nicaragua and my dad he's a white guy born and raised in California, and grew up in the 90s. And I was always this misfit kid. I mean, just the most awkward. I had a back brace. I had awkward highlights in my hair because my mom wanted me to look more white. I had braces. Like, I was just the most awkward little kid ever. And so I had no friends. I had the hardest time socially as a kid. I would have like maybe one best friend for a while, and it was tough growing up, and I was always trying so hard to find something I fit in with and something I could be good at. And it was even hard fitting in with my own family. With my Latin family, so many of them were 3,000 miles away. And those that were here were a little bit like, oh, you're different from us. And then, unfortunately, my dad's side of the family was not that warm and friendly either. I've tried to unpack why, and there's a million theories. Is it because we are Latino? Maybe. Is it because they're just antisocial? Are they neurodivergent and just simply like that? Who knows? Is it because they're kind of German and maybe German people are cold? I don't know. Some things we'll never know the answer to, but my dad's family was not very warm either. And I tried everything. I tried to find belonging in athletics, in performing arts, and nothing really clicked. And then when I was a teen, I became very religious. My family was going through some difficulties with a family member having some very serious addiction issues. And so we turned to religion, and we were praying for him to get better, and he didn't. And we'd pray and pray and pray, and then we'd just double down on the religion. We're like, well, we're obviously not doing it right. We just need to get more religious, and then things will get better. And during that time, I was part of the praise team at the church. I was going like at least 3 times a week to some kind of church function. And I got caught up in the purity movement, which, if you're not familiar with the purity movement, it's the idea that you should save yourself for marriage, and really that all sexuality really is sinful until you're married. And then even once you're married, there's a lot of stigmas. And so I got married at 19 years old. And we ran away because we were scared. We grew up under a religion that threatened us with eternal hellfire if we sinned, or if, heaven forbid, you died and you weren't saved, or you died right way while you were sinning. That's a scary mindset to be in. So to us, getting married felt like a life jacket to save us from this very, very scary reality that we believed ourselves to be in. So we did that. And then that marriage, we were both 19 years old. We had no business being married. I mean, he didn't have the maturity to get and keep a job to help pay bills. I had no sense of boundaries. So he wouldn't get a job. I got 3 jobs. I took out student loans to make the bills get paid. Anything I had to do. And after a few years, I couldn't take it anymore. And I got divorced. And when I got divorced, I went from being kind of the darling at my church to getting kicked out. They said, we no, thank you. We would not like you to be here anymore. You are welcome to not come back. You can be our friend, but we think you're a bad example. So I kind of had to just figure out my identity after that without religion to lean on for my source of community and identity and self. And that led to kind of a very tough time for a couple years, where I had to rebuild or rediscover my identity and rebuild my friend groups. And I ultimately was able to come back from that when I found comedy. And I built a fantastic community around me, and sense of self and all of that. And I find that now, in part thanks to comedy, I'm thriving. But it's not comedy itself. It's really the people I met along the way that helped to build me up and bring me to a really healthy place where I am today.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to unpack in a short period of time, my friend. Thank you for sharing. What do you think in the house today? Anybody relate to some of the things that Kat's sharing with us already? I've seen a couple of hearts in the air. I wondered, Kat, do you look back in hindsight at those troubled moments growing up, those difficult rejection moments, and almost say, thank you, because you helped shape me into who I am, maybe? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm someone capable of so much more empathy because I had those moments. I'm currently in a relationship with someone who has had a charmed life. He's fantastic, but there are times where there's a real disconnect. And he's like, well, why doesn't that person just, fix their life? Or why are they sad? I don't understand why they're sad. I'm like, honey, sometimes there's things that people can't control, and it sucks, and they just feel sad, and you have to give them a hug and not just kind of dismiss people's sadness. We struggle with that, but I at least am capable of that empathy because I went through it myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting your journey through religion. I loved what you said. I make a note of it. I doubled down, right? I found something that I thought was going to work, and I doubled down on it. I think that's a normal stage of life. When we go through life, we think, hey, I'm looking for an answer. Somebody suggests this, or we stumble along this, and we think, okay, it's working. But I loved what you said, Kat. I must not be doing it right, so I'm going to try it again. When do we ever get to the point where we realize, I'm not trying this again? I've tried it and I've tried it and it doesn't work for me. We have to come to that realization sooner or later, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, I draw the line, whether it's religion or any other kind of a system of thought or philosophy that we're doubling down on and kind of depending on for answers. I draw the line at where it becomes harmful and detrimental. I'm sure that there is a point where religion gives people hope and is positive. When it starts to lead to disruptions in your family, say, with my parents, for example, they got to a point where they just completely disagreed. My mom became too fundamentalist, and my dad, he's a lifelong Catholic Democrat. So, there was a line for them, and he started to pull away and say, if you continue down this path, I want a divorce, right? There's a hard line where Do you dedicate yourself to that religion to the point where you end a 20-year marriage? Right? There's a hard line right there.
Mm.
And ideally, you don't even get to the point where a threat like that is thrown out there. You step back and you look at what are smaller signs that you're getting close to that border of where that philosophy or religion or group is pulling you in a little too much.
Yeah. This is kind of a little bit off topic, but you strike a chord in me, and I think our chat is lighting up. People are now sharing, they've gone through divorce, their family's gone through divorce. What do you think it is in your experience, Kat, that causes us humans to have such an allegiance to an ideology, even when that ideology can be hurting us? Any thoughts on that? I know that's in the deep end of the pool, right?
Yeah, we're getting really deep here, but sure.
I know. We'll come out. We'll come out. I promise you. I'll pull you out here in a half a second, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
So I'm I'm a avid reader of psychology and behavioral science. I have actually a graduate degree in economics, which is a behavioral science. And one big thing, I'll say two things. People don't like cognitive dissonance, right? It's a very uncomfortable feeling to hold two contradictory truths in our mind. And to know that we have doubled down and devoted a lot of resources and time to something that was the wrong thing is very uncomfortable. And we naturally want to avoid discomfort. And that's human nature. The other thing is I would say also like the pain of being wrong, the pain of knowing we made a mistake. And some people will bend over backwards and bend themselves into pretzels to avoid that side of things, to avoid going, I was wrong. I mean, we all know somebody who will never admit that they're wrong ever externally in arguments, but sometimes we can be that way with ourselves too. So I think those are the two things, the discomfort of cognitive dissonance and the ego, the fragility of our own egos.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Now, you've been able to take this ego of yours and kind of put it in check. You've done that, it seems like, through comedy, yes? Now, I'm curious about, did you stumble upon comedy? I know you talked about it became your community, but have you ever thought about being a comedian? Was it something deep inside of you, or did it just evolve? Did you just come upon it?
So comedy was always something I shared with my dad growing up. When he would take me to the zoo and we'd have our special father-daughter times and outings, museums and such. On the way there, we would listen to comedy. Sometimes it'd be George Carlin. Sometimes it would be the now infamous Bill Cosby, because his stuff was clean. We'd listen to a lot of stand-up, and sometimes my treat, if I was a good kid, I got a good grade or did well on a test, would be I got to stay up late and watch the Jay Leno monologue on The Tonight Show. So it always held a really special place in my heart. And I'd been doing performing arts for a long time, and when I started working full-time as an adult, I've worked in the analytics space for a long time in addition to comedy. I really missed the creative side. And I had a friend who ran a comedy show in town, and I hopped on that, and I was good at it, and I just kept doing it several times a week for 10 years.
I love it. I love it. I watched your video on your YouTube, and you have that in the beginning of your seconds in your opening, and I don't know if I want to give it away or not, but you refer to yourself as a Latina. You said that you were at a certain age, and then you talked a little bit that about your kids were growing up. I thought it was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. You found a way to use your story, kind of make fun of yourself along the way that's extremely humorous. Did that come natural to you, Kat? Is that something you had to learn? Interesting. Just curious.
I would say a little bit of both. I've always been kind of what's the word, self-deprecating, and very like concise with my words, right? So in social situations, I'll say things. I bomb all the time. I bomb socially. That's partly like why I was such an awkward kid. Always trying to like crack a joke when it was the wrong moment. But it eventually was honed into an actual skill as an adult. And then, from the natural first inklings of doing some stand up and not bombing, just telling the jokes, being decent at it, I've learned the craft of storytelling and taking something from just being kind of funny to being like gut bustingly really, really good to
Yeah.
the professional level.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm not a comedian. I'd love to peek inside the life of a comedian. Do you, like a writer, have ideas, epiphanies? You're driving down the road and you go, oh shoot, right? That would be a great line. Is that how your brain works when you come up with a comedy? Give us a peek inside of how you create your material, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. I mean, sometimes absolutely. I'll just be spacing out and I'll think of something. Um, that's like the 10% of the time where it just comes to me. Most of the time, most of my writing these days, I have to be very intentional. I sit down with my notebook at a coffee shop and I will journal. I'll just free write maybe for 15 minutes, like the artist's way, and just get all the foam off the top of my brain. And then after that, somehow, I don't know how or why, but after that 15 minutes of free writing, then the real jokes start to come out. I also notice that when I free write, it kind of purges whatever's in my soul. And I
Hmm.
like to write from that place, not so much from my logic brain or kind of, what's going on in the day. I like to kind of dig deep. That's
Yeah.
just the type of comic that I am, though.
Yeah, I love that. So you use this free writing to get rid of, I love it. You call it the foam. It's
Mhm.
like taking the foam off of the coffee or whatever, right? You just scoop that off with a spoon, dump it in the trash. And then you're what's underneath is where you're pulling these nuggets of truth from that become your stand up. I
Yeah,
love
we
that.
we all have kind of this buzz going on in our brain, just kind of like the anxieties of the day and just kind of nonsense things and almost, our defenses are up. We're living in our defenses and you can't really write from your defenses. You got to write from what's really there. And if you set a quota of pages that you need to fill with your thoughts and feelings, eventually you run out of your own guard and you finally get to the meat and potatoes of how you're feeling. But it doesn't happen the first page or the second page. You've got to get to page 3 or 4, and then it starts to really come out.
Yeah. I've wondered about this always with creative beings. I think we all have an essence of creativity in us, right? Can't now my kids, I've got four, they're grown. My youngest is 17, will be 18 this year. But the majority of them went through theater and drama. So they have that vibe about them of performing and being out there in the public. Um, how did you get over, did you ever have any stage fright? I guess is where I'm going with this. Number one, did you ever have any stage fright? And then how did you get over the stage fright?
I never had stage fright because my utter lack of friendship and attention from friends and family and that hunger to be seen completely outweighed any fear, which is sad, but
I love
it's
it.
true. Yeah, I was so needy. I'm like, just look at me, just tell me I'm good at something. I don't care if I act a fool. I just want love, please.
I love it. I love it. So out of desperation, here comes the superstar now. I love it. You mentioned something about, again, I'm going to go back. I've got a spoon in my hand. I'm taking off the foam off the top, which I absolutely love. I ride mountain bike for a passion, and a lot of times when I first start to ride, I could actually even be physically out of breath, just kind of let me mentally drained, and I'm not even up the first hill yet, right, Kat? But it
Mhm.
seems like once I break through that, there's a lane, there's a space that you get in, and then all of a sudden you just start churning on a different level, right?
Mhm.
I've heard a plethora of people talk about this inner unction, this, some in the religious field call it an anointing, a spirit led. It's kind of like an out of body experience, but this surge of energy is flowing through them, and artists feel it and they express it on a painting. Musicians feel it and they express it in song. Do I understand that you, a comedian, feels that and expresses it in comedy? Yes, all goes together. Yeah, would you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think comedy's got its own little layers to it, right? A good joke is a little bit like a sculpture. I compare it to that because when you're sculpting something, you have an idea maybe of what you want to make. But I've heard a lot of people who write about sculptors. They say that they they find the statue in the stone, right? There's an element of chipping away at the statue at first and just seeing what shape is organically in the stone, and then honing it and fine tuning it until it becomes the statue that it's going to be.
Yeah.
And when I'm journaling and I'm in that zone, like I'm finding an idea. I'm finding the shape that this idea kind of lends itself to. I'm I'm chipping away at that stone and discovering it. And then through performing it over and over and over again, that's the practice of honing, of polishing that stone and actually getting those details in there. Because I wouldn't say that most jokes are written in just um, one swift whoosh of genius on stage while riffing, which some comics are brilliantly talented and that's how they write. It's not how I write.
Yeah.
um, I'm a lot more methodical in my process.
Yeah. So have you ever done just like, do you just in the comedian world, is there like just stand up? I mean, you just go live. Improv is the word I was trying to search for out of my brain that didn't want to give it to me. Do you do that? You just get up and riff. It's like a spoken word or whatever comes to you at the moment. Do you ever do any of those?
Sometimes, I mean, every comic has a different little balance that they like to do between improvising and actually doing the jokes that they've written. Sometimes I'll start with a joke that I've written and I'll add on some lines if I feel inspired in the moment there that come to me. I do that with stories a lot too. I'll add a couple extra lines in there about certain details that I remember just in the moment. um, and sometimes it's fun to just riff and that's how I'll write a new joke. Occasionally it just happens. Like I recently wrote one in the moment while doing a show about my boyfriend. I personally am a little bit more to the left of center politically. My boyfriend's a little bit to the right. And why did I decide to date a boyfriend on the other side of the aisle? Well, can someone tell all these liberal boys that I don't want to be polyamorous? When did they all agree that that was the way to go?
I love it.
And that kind of became a premise for a new bit that I'm working on.
I love it. So how many times a week do you perform?
Oh gosh. When I'm really going hard, it can be like 5 to 7 times a week, maybe more.
Wow, I love it. Now, heroes in the comedy world that you look up to, aspire to, those that have inspired you, who would they be?
Um, oh gosh, I really love Mike Birbiglia. I think he's such a fantastic storyteller. I myself am more of a storytelling comedian. Um, he does a great job of bringing a whole hour together from beginning to end. If you haven't seen the new one on Netflix, it's about his journey to fatherhood. I thought it was really beautiful. And then the other comic that I actually know her in real life, I knew her when she was just hosting open mics here in Los Angeles. We did festivals together. And now she's on HBO and touring the whole country. Atsuko Okatsuka. Check her out. She's fantastic. And she's also a storytelling comedian. And what's funny is I didn't even know that she did my favorite style of comedy because I'd only seen her do festivals and short bits. And then when I saw her HBO special, I fell in love with her. I was like,
I love it. I love it. You make me think. There's who's the I want to say Italian guy. He's just
Sebastian
performing.
Sebastian Maniscalco, most likely.
Yes. What do you think about him?
Um, he really thinks he's Frank Sinatra, doesn't he? He's really got a
Yes, he
Rat Pack
does.
vibe going.
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing I heard about him is that before he made it big, he was about to give up comedy. Months before he ever had an agent or a manager, he was at the Comedy Store going, gosh, no one gets me. No one wants to sign me. I should just walk away from it all. And then a few months later, boom, everything changed.
I love it. Somebody's asking in the chat, what was the first comics name that Kat mentioned? The one on Netflix who was a storyteller. Who were you recommending, Kat?
Mike Birbiglia.
Yeah, Mike Birbiglia. That's a Birbiglia. Yeah, you got to check him out. I botched his name to pieces in the chat, but if you search comedian Mike Birbiglia, you'll find it. Hey, what's your thoughts about John Mulaney?
Ooh, I like him. I have not watched his latest special, so I'm not up to speed on John Mulaney. But at this point, I think, I think he's always been pretty funny in my opinion, and his jokes have been relatively clean and smart, well written. I know he's got some addiction issues he's been facing, and I wish him the best of luck with handling those.
Yeah, I saw his set when he came back. I think he was at rehab for a while and came back. His ability, Kat, to talk about his experience and turn it into a laughter is really phenomenal. I mean, he took us through a whole story. You talk about storyteller, right? He took us through a whole story about buying cocaine and from his buyer and how he did and what he did and his time, he got incarcerated and everything else. And he was able to tell this story that made you feel compassionate for him, but you're cracking up laughing in the other realm, right? Because he's making such light of it. It was so beautiful. I really enjoy him. My wife and I watched him a lot. So listen, hey, we got a question. You okay with opening the mic here half a second and
sure.
Let somebody ask a question? Cool. All right. I see. Is it Adrian? Go ahead. I see your hand up. Unmute yourself and share your question, please. Go ahead.
Hey, Kat. How you doing?
Great.
Good.
Thanks.
How you doing?
Good. I just had a question. Did you ever do a show in the high desert, specifically Desert Barn Brewery?
I might have.
Yeah, because you look oddly familiar to a comedian I met up here in the high desert, and maybe you did a comedy show at a local brewery up here, and I was just kind of curious if that was you.
Sounds about right. I go up to the high desert a few times a year, definitely. I like to stay in Southern California, so I'm always down to trek out there.
Yeah, that was there was a comic show that it was hosting a whole bunch of LA-based comics, and I kind of recognized your name, so I went and Googled you, and I'm like, oh, well, that looks a lot like her, and I was just kind of curious if it was you.
Yep, likely was.
Right on.
I love it. The connections on the Circles app, right? Who would have known? Adrian, I appreciate your question. Thank you so much. So how do you do stand up for us here? I mean, a joke is not a joke anymore, right? Kat, it's a story. But can you drop something on us? That's a lot of pressure, right? Can you do a bit of a set for us or something?
Oh my gosh!
I want to let these people inside this person that you are too.
Sure.
No pressure. No pressure.
And I could do something that's like, oh, I've done this joke a million times, so I know it's gonna work. But like, I'm too adventurous, so I want to do a story that's a little bit newer for you guys. So it's about the time I got catfished. Like, I'm so excited to be in a relationship now because dating was getting bad. I was supposed to go on a date with a doctor, a 35-year-old doctor. I was so excited. This is exactly who my mom has always dreamed I would date. And I show up, and this man is 65 years old and gaunt, you guys. Gaunt, like a strong wind would have just blown him away. Like, I was like, waiter, get sandbags. This is a hazard. I was shocked, and he goes, I'm sorry, I look different from my photograph. I'm a COVID doctor, and I have spent the last 2 years caring for patients on Skid Row, and it made me lose a lot of weight. I said, well, shit, he's a hero. I guess I have to at least give him a hand job. And so I stayed on the date, and I was trying to find things to like about him. My mom's like, you got to find the positive in everything. And I stared and I said, you know what? He's got nice eyelashes. So there's that. And at least our kids will never get anything in their eyes. If we got to that point, they'd have safe retinas. And then he says to me, you know, have you ever been catfished before? I said, never before. He's like, well, I've been catfished before. I showed up to the date and the woman was much heavier than her photo. So I left. I said, oh, so you stood a woman up because of her weight. He goes, well, she was dishonest. So I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I left, you guys. I said, screw that doctor. He's probably not even a doctor. He's probably just some guy who did my friend's bad boob job in Mexico. And that's actually a callback to another joke. So that's the tricky thing about doing stories and more long-form comedy is that sometimes the punchline at the end of the story is a callback to another story's punchline.
Yeah. I love it.
But hopefully it stood alone.
Yeah, it did. The love, I asked the people in the chat to just throw some hearts as our form of laughter. I think this is an amazing opportunity. I don't know the rest of you, but a comedian coming on the Circles app without hearing your applause and yet being able to deliver, you got my vote, Kat. You have got my vote. I love it. I'm looking at a quote on your website. It says, I want a baby like I want a tattoo. If I wake up with one, I'll keep it. Where in the world did that come from? That is so hilarious. What is that rooted in?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think I came up with that after meeting this girl at UC Santa Barbara. She had a peace sign tattooed on her wrist. And I was like, oh, that's a cool tattoo. Why did you get that? She was like, I don't know. I woke up with it. She's like, I honestly got it in a blackout. I was like, wow, a tattoo in a blackout. And then later on, I was thinking about like, am I ready for kids? And I'm like, well, you know, if I just got knocked up, I guess I'd, roll with it. And then I thought about the girl with that tattoo and I was like, there it is. That's a punchline right there. If I woke up with one, I'd keep it.
I love it. If I woke up with one, I'd keep it. That would be hilarious. Hilarious. Brett's giving you a shout out in the chat. Saw your stuff on YouTube. It's hilarious. Thank you, Brett. I appreciate that very much. Very much. Can you do just a snippet of your video? I had alluded to it earlier on your YouTube page when you talk about how old you were and what that was in relative to your kids.
Oh my gosh, that joke. That is an opener I've been doing for very many years. It's like, hey guys, I'm Latina. I'm 23, but I'm Latina, but I'm 23, so my kids are grown. And that's such a fun opener because it plays on the stereotype, because I am not the stereotype. And I think the point of that joke, because I've heard some people be like, that's an offensive joke. By the way, never Latinos. Latinos always laugh at that joke because we get it. It's always a very PC white lady who's like trying to be her best intentioned self and then police my comedy for me. Thank you. That was a sarcastic thank you. It is okay for me to make that joke because I am joking about my own culture and I prove the stereotype wrong. So it works.
Yeah. Which I applaud your boldness, because I mean we live in a disclaimer world, right, Kat? And I don't know. Now, we're going to talk about one of the things that I love about people, not only comedians, but people who find their own lane and find their own way. It's not that they're derogatory, but they just don't give a flat frick. So Bill Burr, are you familiar with him? I'm sure you are, right?
Oh yeah, he's one of my heroes.
Yeah, Bill is like the most amazing talent. Like he offends everybody, not just somebody, everybody. And they pack. I watched his stand-up at Red Rock Amphitheater, right, in Colorado, and the place was jammed, Kat. So I find it interesting that people say, oh, you shouldn't, and they judge, but yet the part of humanity loves that when
You
people
know,
have the boldness, right? Come on,
I
talk to
I
me
have
about that a
some
little bit.
commentary on that, on the nature of PC comedy. Bill Burr actually does a great job of towing a fine line. Because people say, oh, he's offensive, but actually, if you really listen and think about who he's poking fun at, I know he pokes fun a lot at women, but in fairness, he's like, women, we as have benefited from some systemic things that men have also benefited from, right? He never makes fun of, say, the disabled or a more marginalized group. You don't hear him punching down much further than maybe at women, and even when it is, it's lighthearted. He's not seriously saying that women are inferior. He's being playful. So he comes across as not giving a flying F, but he actually does. He toes the line, and that's kind of the art. And you get some other comedians who truly don't give a flying fuck. Sorry. And they'll make fun of other races, and actually will make marginalized groups the butt of the joke, and they're not being cheeky about it. So it's really important to note the distinction, and try and see, like, is there actually malicious intent? Is this person being cheeky? Are they genuinely punching down? Like, who is the joke really directed at, and why? So I like Bill Burr. He walks the line very well without being an actual jerk.
Yeah, we've got some other Bill Burr fans in the chat. They're talking about it as well. I agree with you. I love Bill Burr, and I think laughing comes with our own maturity, right, Kat? I mean, we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves. In fact, when I started to advertise this masterclass, I did to a lot of our groups that are on Circles. See, Circles deals with a lot of people going through difficult situations. We've got divorce, we've got cancer, we've got identity issues, we've got all of this heavy stuff. That's why I was so excited to have you come on, because my sales pitch was, are you ready to lighten the load a little bit? So sometimes we've got to get outside of ourselves, laugh at ourselves, or just genuinely laugh, period. And laughter, I know we hear it, laughter is the best medicine, but I believe that it is. I think laughter can actually change the entire dimension of our being, don't you? It's got to be its own medicine, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. My boyfriend and I have bonded over our ability to laugh at such dumb things. Just that, like, that's our relationship has so much fart humor in it. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. I would never make potty jokes on stage, but you have no idea how much bathroom humor takes place in my household.
I love it. So does your partner ever become the butt of your jokes, Kat?
So far not really, because he's actually a really nice person. So I haven't quite rolled him in very much. But I do think that that I've learned a lot through the comedy community, and I think I have some takeaways to share with people that I've learned through my journey with comics. If you don't mind my sharing, after all, it is about laughing away loneliness.
Yeah, of course.
I think the biggest thing I've learned from comedy, it's a very small world, and some of us live in smaller communities and larger communities, but comedy, everyone knows everyone. And my first and biggest rule now is to be positive and avoid gossiping about others. Positive interactions are so important. And I know it's easy to bond with each other by complaining, but there's a fine line between complaining about situations and complaining about people. And you'd be surprised at how much things can go around, and the people you complain about find out. And that's a way in the long run to lose friendships. So to build community, definitely stay positive. That's my first rule of trying to be less lonely that I learned. The second one is to show up for the friends you do have. You know, you've got to plug the holes in the boat. Actually, if you want to be texted on your birthday by your friends, text them on their birthday. Um, when you're in a place of loneliness and you feel like there's no one around you, sometimes you have to be the first one to be bold and be vulnerable, and take the step and make the effort. Which takes me to my third point for building community is that you have to be vulnerable, but also resilient. And that's something I really learned from doing comedy, because every time I tell a new joke, it's very scary. And I always risk bombing and telling the joke and hearing no laughter and maybe never being invited back to do that show again. But I have to, or else I'll never tell a new joke. I'll be stuck with the same 10 minutes I've been doing. And you're kind of stuck. You're that way with friendships too. You have to put yourself out there, do something nice for somebody, call somebody on the phone. It's a two-way street. You can't just be like, oh, no one ever reaches out to me. Wow, I have no friends. So you have to do it, but also know not everybody you reach out to will be responsive, and that's okay. We all bomb. So you find some kind of self-care, some way to soothe yourself when those rejections happen. But you have to try. Just like I write new jokes, you have to try to build those new friendships. But we're not for everybody. You know, there are people who probably watch my comedy and don't like my jokes at all. And no matter how funny I am or how good I get at comedy, they still won't like me. And friendship is the same way. You will not be everyone's cup of tea. So if you're not, you try to be friends with someone, they don't like you, don't let it get you down. Don't get bitter about it. Just go, okay, I wasn't for them. And move on and try to make more other friends. Because there will be someone who loves you for exactly who you are, who is a weirdo just like you. My boyfriend farts a lot, and I laugh my butt off at it every single time, and it doesn't get old. And that is so weird. I had no idea. But my gassy boyfriend and I are perfect for each other. And the last one, and this one my boyfriend told me to add this one, was always be open to being the listener. We all need to be heard. And it's easy when you're, especially when you're in a vulnerable place emotionally, and I'm guilty of this, you just want to vent. You want to vent all the time. But you push people away if you do that too much. So be deliberate about being a listener sometimes. Call a friend up just to listen on purpose, because that'll come back around to you, especially if you cultivate that among your friends. And then you'll have people willing to listen to you later on. So it's back and forth. So those are my four things. Be positive, show up for the friends you have, be vulnerable but resilient, and be a listener.
I love that. I love that. Friends in the house, have you enjoyed our time with Kat? We've got a few more minutes to go. The hearts are going up.
Yes,
in the air.
definitely.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all. Hey, listen, we're going to open up for a couple of minutes. Anybody have a question for Kat before we let her go and close our session tonight? Somebody in the house? Go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us who you are. If you got a comment or question, we'll make time for a little bit. Go ahead. Anybody at all?
Do you play a musical instrument? Sorry, I'm here having a paper towel fight with my son. I've been listening here. Yeah. But do you do
Hello.
anything musical, like comedy stuff, like Lonely Athlete?
I occasionally do. I do know how to play the guitar, and I've been known to write some fun lyrics from time to time. I actually did during the pandemic, I did a 9 to 5 parody, a work from home 9 to 5. And that's on YouTube somewhere. I'm sure you could find it. It's me in a blonde wig pretending to be Dolly Parton.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. Yeah, I run a music studio, and sometimes when I shits and giggles, like on my own spare time, I dabble in that. So
I love it. I love it. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate your comment. Absolutely. So, this burning question that's inside of me to ask you, Kat,
Sure.
is when are we going to see you on Netflix? Is Netflix special in your vision board?
Oh, it's definitely on my vision board. I've been talking to a producer from a streamer, but I won't say what because I don't want to jinx it. But hopefully in the next year or two, you guys will see me on a major streaming platform. I won't say which. So that's a mystery to be determined.
I love it. It'll make us continue to now Google you forever, right? Friends will be Googling Kat forever, going, I want to see her on Netflix. You alluded to our title, Laugh Away Loneliness. Kat Alvarado, have you been able to laugh away loneliness in your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's through finding the positive, through finding the silly. I've gotten through some of the darkest, most lonely times in my life. I have a specific memory of I was going through some kind of a breakup. This would have been about a decade ago, and I was just starting to do comedy. And as I was trying to write those first 10 minutes of jokes, I was desperately seeking things to write observational comedy about. And it made me open my eyes to looking at the world as though I were, say, Weird Al Yankovic. It was like I put on these funny goggles and I saw it everywhere. I was at CVS looking at this Mucinex cardboard box. It was like an advertising cardboard, like they put the bottles in. And I was laughing at that. Like there was something silly about that. I was seeing billboards and laughing at those silly misspellings on billboards. You drive past a motel and it says we have a pool and jacuzzi, but the lights are out, so it says we have a poo jacuzzi. You miss those things. So when you're sad, try to put on the silly goggles and think like a comedian. And if you were looking for things to make fun of, and you will surprise yourself with what you find, because you might find a lot of silly things around.
Yeah. I love it. I've watched, I've spent a good portion of my career in hospice and palliative care, Kat. So I've been in the grief and bereavement side for a long time. And I can't remember the name, but I remember that at some of the senior care homes that I used to provide services for, every once in a while, they would bring in a comedian. And it was hilarious. So here you have this 80-year-old male, female, doesn't matter, but they're actually making jokes about getting old and about having different things. And it was from bodily fluids to mind and what I forgot. And everybody in the house was cracking up laughing. It was the greatest thing I think I've ever seen, is to have all of these humans going through these difficult life conditions, and yet they found a time and a reason to laugh. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm taking from tonight's conversation. Yes.
Mm-hmm. We can always find something to laugh at if we let ourselves be light for a second. Let ourselves laugh at our humanity. One thing that I love about comedy is that it gives me community. When people laugh at a joke, it's usually because they find truth in it. They resonate with it. And that means that laughter is in itself a sign of community and connection. When I'm telling my story and a whole audience cracks up, they have connected to it, and something about my experience is common with theirs. And that is so magical that we as humans have collective experiences. It's really special. And you mentioned palliative care. I kind of want to dedicate this session actually to someone. Now that you mention it, someone who passed away. It was a comedian. His name was Marty Ross. And he started comedy, I believe, when he was 70. And I met him about a decade ago at the Burbank Comedy Festival in 2013. And he was only a couple years into comedy. And he kept doing it. It was something he found so fun. He wasn't trying to be famous. It was just something he found a ton of joy in. And then last year, we found out he had cancer, and the last weekend he didn't tell anybody like how severe it was, but he headlined in the main room at Flappers one weekend. What we didn't know is that was to be his last weekend with us. So he headlined the show. He did comedy until his very last weekend walking on this earth. And then he passed away. But at least he passed doing what he loved, which is laughing and being around the community of comedians who showed up to that show to support him. And of course, they gave him a standing ovation at the end. So I want to dedicate this to Marty Ross. He was a great guy. And you can actually see him on America's Got Talent. So go ahead and look up Marty Ross. He's the octogenarian comedian. So if you're an AGT fan, you might have already seen him at some point. This was a few years ago. But Marty Ross, great guy.
Marty Ross. I just found is he on Instagram?
Probably, yeah.
Marty Ross Comedy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just dropped his, it looks like some of the links on there are not working, but I just dropped his link in the chat. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Kat, thank you for that. And it's in his honor, and his honor will always live on because our time with you, Kat, it's been recorded and it'll be live. It'll live on Spotify, on Circle Spotify. So yeah, I love it. Community. That's what Circles is all about too, bringing people together who are going through similar life challenges and having each other find support and knowing that that other person gets me. It's kind of like you, the comedian, the audience, they get you. What you're saying resonates with them, and it creates a wonderful bond. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. Friends, we're all out of time tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you who've come tonight to support and listen to Kat Alvarado, her premiere here on Circles. Thank each and every one of you for being here. Kat, thank you for being here. We so appreciate you sharing and being so vulnerable and open with us. We thank you very, very much. And we hope to have you come back. And maybe we just turn you loose on the mic and let you do a whole set on the Circles app. I don't know. So maybe that would work for you. But
pandemic style.
Yes, pandemic style indeed. And you know what? You're going to have to get used to the heart says the laughter, right? The hearts are going to be your laughter. So the more hearts that go up in the air, that's the resonating with what you're saying with us. Friends, thank you for being here again. My name is Jeff. I've been your host. At the conclusion of our meeting, you're going to have to get a chance to give us your feedback. Would you do that? Share your thoughts and comments about Kat, your time with her time with us. She's going to get this feedback, so encourage her along the way as well. And without further ado, Kat, again, thank you for being our guest on Circles. And that concludes our evening tonight, friends. Thank you very much. Let's show some love one more time for our special guest, Kat Alvarado. I put all of her links in the chat, by the way. Follow her on Instagram, go to her YouTube channel, and get a good laugh tonight before you go to bed. Thank you again, my friend. We'll see you next time right here on the Circles app. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.